Okay. All right. So I wanted to quickly go over the agenda, what I've laid out, and this the demo that I'm going to be going through is on 9.2 image 30. So it is close to the latest and greatest that there is out there. So I think it will be nice for you to see some of the new Fluid home pages and a lot of the new features enhancements in image 30. So I'll be jumping back and forth between the PeopleSoft as well as this presentation. So starting with a quick grants management overview, then going into pre-award, creating a proposal, talking about the importance of the product ID, talking a little bit about creating a proposal budget. I'm going to talk briefly about proposal security and grants workflows that are delivered. And then we're going to continue moving in the life cycle over to post-award, so submitting a proposal and generating an award. I want to talk about some of the key setup steps and also talk about all the information that gets moved over to post-award from pre-award. There's some really great delivered grants reporting fields on the award profile, new functionality called Supplemental Data and Page and Field Configurator that are really cool that I want to talk about, and then go into a billing and collections example, and then spend some time talking about reporting. And you know what, closeout, I didn't put too many slides in there for that, but it is a part of the important piece of the grants life cycle, and there's multiple ways within the system that allows you to slowly shut down slowly or fast, depending on your settings, shut down your project, so we can talk about closeout as well. Any questions before we get started? All right, well then let's get going. Okay, so grants management was designed to support the key business processes related to administering a research program or research grant. So starting from preparing and submitting a proposal, there is protocol management functionality as well for those that are doing human and animal protocols, opportunity to track award negotiations. Then once your award is received and generated, the ability to manage your awards and your projects and, of course, your budgets, as those may change over time. Facilities and administration, F&A, that is the term for overhead processing or indirect cost processing within PeopleSoft. So we can spend some time talking about how that is automated. And then because grants integrates with the other modules like contracts and billing, using the grants functionality with the combination of the other modules, you can create invoices. There is specific functionality within grants for letter of credit processing or drawdowns, allowing you to group your invoicing for those sponsors that you're able to draw down directly from them. Payment processing, so obviously once the invoice is sent over to AR, you have all the functionality within accounts receivable, as well as some additional abilities to search specifically on transactions related to your grant. Let's see, so multiple tools for financial reporting and reviewing your project status. I just mentioned project award closeout, so there's many tools for controlling transactions, hitting your grants, and we can talk about that too. And then also there are some delivered grants workflows that I'd like to briefly talk about. Okay, so let's jump into PeopleSoft. Okay, so I am, as you see right here, I am on the Delivered Grants Management homepage. So you'll see.
Jessica, do you have like a second monitor or something like that? We can't see anything right now.
Oh, you can't see it right now?
No.
You know what? I actually turned off my second monitor to make it easier. So you're not. Oh, you know what? Maybe I only shared. Hold on one second.
Yeah, share your desktop.
Share. Hold on. Let's see.
Just the little arrow at the bottom, the little arrow thing, you just click on that and do the share desktop. Should be good.
Yeah, like share desktop rather than sharing a specific application. You might just be sharing your...
Okay, hold on. I'm going to stop sharing for a second and reshare.
Yeah.
You know, I use WebEx all the time, but, okay, share. File. You know what? It's not giving me that. Is there screen? Let me just try the screen, see if that works.
There you go.
We have something.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool. Thank
good.
you for pointing that out. Okay, so now you can see the grants homepage. Okay, and so an actual user can have multiple home pages, as you see in the drop-down here. I was on the grants, here's the employee self-service. Oracle is really working on not only bringing information to you as a user, but also making the navigation easier. So one of the tiles on the grants homepage is the grants navigation collection, which I'll be using a lot today. That is a collection of links to your frequently used navigation within grants. Okay, so let's talk about creating a proposal. So obviously you can start with a brand new proposal. We can create proposal templates, or if you have a proposal that is similar to what you want to create, you can go ahead and copy a proposal. So in the interest of time, that's what I'm going to do. I have a proposal stage out there, and let's go ahead and start with an existing proposal. Okay, so we're going to be working with 161. Okay.
So this would be researchers would have this is what they would be opening? A researcher who's submitting a proposal would be?
Yeah, so you know, that's for your organization to decide who gets security. And that actually there's one additional way I want to show you for entering proposals. I have a slide on the proposal security. So some organizations, you know, decide that they want to centralize this piece, but it could also be decentralized where researchers can come in here and enter their proposal themselves. It's going to be up to you as an organization. So there are lots of different tabs on the proposal, but there's actually a very few pieces of information that are really required for you to enter and save a proposal. So you see these little asterisks up here. So these are some of the key fields that must be populated in order for you to save your proposal. So let's go ahead and just, I'm going to update some of this information so you can see that this, in fact, was something that we were entering. So I have my PI, my project manager, my key principal investigator, sponsor ID. I've input hopefully one of your existing sponsors. Down here at the bottom, you'll notice there's a start and end date. They're grayed out right here because I copied this proposal and it was already built out. But if you had a 5-year grant, you have the option to actually split that out into multiple budget periods. And that's what this function does here to build out your periods. So you would put in 2. If it was 2 years, click build, and it automatically builds out your multiple budget periods. There's multiple ways that you can go simple or build out your proposal into multiple projects and multiple budgets. I'm going to show you kind of my preference on how to do it, but keep in mind it is very flexible and there's different ways to do things. So some people decide, you know what, I just want to have one budget period for the full date range. I'm splitting out, in this example, creating 2 different budget periods because it's a 2-year award. Okay, so we've entered in our key information that we needed to. You know, if you had award reference numbers, if you had that information at that time, you could enter it. There's other optional fields like purpose that you guys can define how you want to categorize your proposals, but not all that information is required. I want to kind of focus on what is key information required. So one of the pieces of information that is required is you're going to have at least one project associated to this proposal. And I'm going to spend quite a bit of time talking about what becomes of this project ID, but for as of right now, it's really just a placeholder number. Okay, so department and a subdivision, and then institution. So as a large university, you may actually have multiple institutions. Here I've just set up one institution for this demo example. Going into the budgets. So for each project, you can have one budget ID or multiple. And for this example, I've decided to split my budget periods into two different budget IDs, and you'll see why once I generate the award. So for this 2-year grant, I have, it's a federal sponsor. I've decided to name my budget ID that, and I've entered in, or in this case copied, a budget which can now be edited for each budget period. Before I go into the budget, I want to spend some time talking about this F&A and pricing setup. So really quick, based on the institution that I selected, we'll bring in some default F&A rates. So those are the indirect overhead rates, and you can have multiple rate types defined. So here, this example is for on-campus, and then also bases. So I'm not sure how many bases you typically work with today, but pretty common, at least in the United States, is a modified total direct cost base, which is most expenses but doesn't include things like equipment. So this is your institution rate defaulting in this example 75 that you're hoping to get, that you typically try to get. And then for this particular proposal, you can enter in what is the budget indirect overhead rate that you want to budget at. So it can, here are the defaults, but you can specify a specific rate for your proposal budget, which we're going to go into next. Now, another really important thing on this page is the product. So you'll see two things related to contracts here, the pricing method and the product. Pricing method, just two options here. How is it that you're going to be billing as incurred or fixed at a high level? And you have the ability to select a product. So when I go back over to the presentation, I just want to show you an example of one of our existing customers that this is how they structured their product ID. They had not cost reimbursable that were not a part of a letter of credit. They had letter of credit drawdowns. They had milestones. They also had customers that were prepaying, and then they also had a need to have a contract where they didn't create any system billing and revenue recognition. What happens when you generate the award, and we'll come back to this, is based on this product that you selected here, these are all the defaults that you can set up on your contract for how you bill and recognize revenue for a sponsor. So very helpful in terms of automating your contract setup and your defaults. You can still make changes once it's awarded, but these are your initial defaults. Contract type you see over here is a great way for grouping for reporting purposes your different type of contracts, as well as you can use it to run billing or revenue by a contract type. You only actually get one choice, unfortunately, so they decided, hey, you know what, I'm going to default in a generic value and remind people that, hey, it needs to be populated. So that's why I have this one off to the end. But from that product, these were all the type of defaults you can get. How do I want to automatically approve invoices and have them ready for processing, or do I want to first review them? What type of form do I want my invoice to print on? What is the frequency of how often I'm billing? And bill by ID, very important once we get over to billing. How do I want to split my invoices? So that product right there is very, very important for defaulting how you want to set up your contract. Okay, so, and I've actually, for my second budget period, I've actually assigned a different product ID, and when I generate the award for this example, I'm going to have two different contract lines, and I can manage my limits by budget year, which is really great. Okay, so any questions on that before I jump into entering in the budget?
Does this allow for two-stage proposals? Like, so,
Two-stage.
so for example, if you have a grant that has an LOI and they get money if they succeed at the LOI, so if it's approved, they get $10,000 to develop the full application. And then if they put in a related, it's the same title, then they build out the full project and it's for a larger amount. Would they be considered two different things or one?
Let me see if I was going to try to repeat it to make sure I heard it. Did you have a question of if you can...
So would it be considered one?
Well, it could be the version. So the question is if there's an initial proposal, goes through the approval process,
Yeah.
and then they come back around and make modification to it, or it's a second, so that's awarded, and then there's a new proposal?
Yeah.
Or the proposal hasn't been awarded yet?
So you can have many grants that have two stages where you have to get through the first stage in order to compete for the larger amount.
for the second,
Yeah.
for more money.
So they're often the same title, right? The proposals are often the same title. There could be two disbursements, so two, like an initial amount of money and then a second amount. Are those treated separately? Are they combined in this?
Yeah.
Can you do it?
Yeah,
So when you get that first award, you actually begin working on the grant, but you haven't gotten the next phases yet?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so what you might want to do, and like I said, with PeopleSoft, it seems like there's always different ways to go about it, but if you actually receive that award and you're beginning work on it, you might go ahead and award that proposal, then create a new proposal, which is probably a copy of the existing proposal, and there's what's called additional information where you can relate proposals. So I kind of skipped over additional information before, but pretty neat feature where based on the additional information type that you selected here, oops, I'm sorry, let me go back. I don't want to create a new one. Based on the type that you selected, the details button changes. So one thing that I really like to use is I like to use this for if you're a subrecipient and you want to put in the primary sponsor. So if somebody, a different university got the award and then you gave it to you, but you want to track who that ultimate sponsor is, this is a great way to associate that award. So if I go back into additional information now and pick related, okay.
So they would be associated, they would be treated as separate.
Yeah, you could basically link them together.
Related question, if you have a proposal and you set it up for, let's say, $10,000, do you have an option of going back and increasing that budget if you have extra awards a year later because of some performance measure, and then it's still the same proposal? So there's an option.
Yep.
So, Mr. Jackson, wouldn't it be dependent on the award from the sponsor because they would have different key identifiers?
Not always. If it's the LOI, then they would call it the same, and then...
title, but the actual award number.
Oh, I don't know.
That ties and links to the fund. Is that...
Okay.
So you received a new actual award in that case?
Yeah. Maybe it's something we need to park here.
Yeah.
Yep, so it really kind of depends on the situation. So once we generate this award, once we submit it, let's start there. Once you submit it, and we'll see that in a second, technically this proposal is locked down for changes. But there's two things. When you generate that award, well, one, you could create a new version, or two, when you generate the award, you still have the ability to make changes in post-award to the budget. Or if there was an example where you really needed to change a proposal after it's been submitted, there is a special security setting that would allow an individual to make changes to that proposal even though it's been submitted. So it's a special role.
So I just want to clarify, when you're talking about submission here is to central office or to sponsor, external sponsor?
So it typically would mean it's submitted to the sponsor, but it's a special flag within PeopleSoft that that is required in order to send it over into post-award, and we're going to see that step in just a minute. So you can see right now my submit status is not submitted. I'm still in proposal draft mode. And there's lots of different proposal statuses that you can utilize, or you could add additional if you needed to for your business process.
And if the external sponsor has their own system and portal, then you would have to enter it in both places?
Unless you built sort of a outbound interface.
What?
An outbound interface. Oh. Mm-hmm. Or another option would be, bringing in an inbound interface, if you've entered it into their system, if there was a way to bring it into your system.
Mm-hmm. Would be nice.
Yep. Okay. Okay, well, let's take a look at the budget. So I'm going into my first budget period. I copied in the existing budget. So here, once again, you have a lot of flexibility how you want to build out your budgets. You define these budget items, and you can build out an extremely detailed budget. And even when you pick your budget item, you could even build it out by individual employee. So because it knows I'm using the budget item of personnel, it allows me the ability to actually bring in individuals into the grant and can build out your budget based on individual employees, and you can add as many individuals as you need to build it out really kind of, from the ground level up. Here, I've just entered it at the high level. So if I look at my travel budget item, you can see I could enter in detailed information about air, ground transportation. It's up to you. It can all be entered in at a very high summary level. You could have one budget item for the whole budget amount. I've even seen some customers that don't decide, you know what, I'm not even going to enter in my budget on the proposal. I'm going to wait, and I'm going to generate the award and enter it on the post-award side. So a lot of flexibility, but what is nice is as you're building out your direct cost budget items, based on that F&A rate that I had entered in previously, it's automatically calculating what the budget indirect, what the indirect budget is. Okay, doing that for you behind the scenes. You could even enter cost sharing amount if you wanted to track a cost sharing component to the budget. Okay, so that is the budget that I've entered for my proposal. And then really, that's it for required information. The rest of these fields, you do have the ability to identify resources being used on associated to this proposal, certifications. You do have the ability to add attachments here. Keywords is kind of a neat functionality in terms of being able to, nice reporting feature if you were looking for existing proposals out there with certain keywords. That could be helpful. But at this point, I've entered in, my basic information, and I could go ahead and submit this proposal. So that's what we're going to do. I did want to spend a couple of, let me go back to my PowerPoint. I wanted to talk about protocols briefly as well as professionals. So I mentioned here about there's a lot of different additional tabs where you can store proposal information that is optional. In terms of the security to that proposal, the PI automatically gets security to it. So any proposal where that individual is a PI, they can access the proposal. And then as delivered, you can give access to individuals based on a department tree, or you can also assign individual people security to an individual proposal. The workflow. I guess I'll talk briefly about the delivered grants workflow. So you have the ability to define a proposal approval process for a workflow, and that can generate both email notifications as well as work lists. You can have an automated notification be emailed for changes in proposal status. And then similarly for protocols, which I'll jump into in just a minute, if you wanted to track human and animal protocols, you have the ability to generate an approval process as well as notifications through email. And then on the post-award side, there is the ability to have email notifications for milestones that are becoming due. Okay, so workflow, it's very configurable. And then I don't have it turned on in this environment just in the interest of time, but at the end, if you're curious to see some more examples of what that might look like, I can show you some examples. Okay, so basically for workflow, when you change a status to pending approval, that's what would trigger the approval process. Okay, protocols. There's one thing I wanted to talk about before we go into post-award. Provides an automated system that enables you to document and amend human and animal protocols and get the necessary approvals. Let's see. So similarly, when working with protocols, they have kind of a similar structure to proposals in that you have the ability to copy proposals. You can also create multiple versions of a proposal. So let's just enter one real quick here. So based on the protocol type that I selected, as I go into the protocol, the pages will vary. So because it's human, I have the ability to enter in information about the subjects, what gender they are, and then there's information for tracking methods and procedures, the ability to add attachments, associated personnel. So that was a human protocol, and then when I go into an animal, you'll see it looks just slightly different.
So if we have a system for the human protocols, is there an ability to bring it in electronically from another system through electronic communication? Or is it have to be re-entered at this stage?
So there's always, I'll have to double check. I don't know if there's a delivered Excel to CI. I can't remember off the top of my head. But if not, you could definitely build one. Cameron can talk to that. I know they use them a lot at Fred Hutch. It's basically an Excel-based tool that you upload the data into one link if you weren't going to build, more of an automated interface. Okay.
You have an external protocol management system.
Okay.
Our ethics department has their own system, so I'm just wondering, like, they have all the paperwork and approvals and everything, if there is a new way for the two systems to communicate.
Yep, definitely. There's opportunities for that. Okay, so once I've created a protocol, I can either associate it to my proposal, or I have the ability to associate it later on at the award level. So let's go back into our 161 proposal and enter in a protocol. Okay, great. Well, let's say we're happy now with everything that's been entered, and we want to go ahead and submit this proposal. It went out the door to the sponsor. We want to lock it down at this point for changes. And so there is a separate page just because they felt that this should be secured. They wanted to give you the ability to secure this separately, to have only certain roles have the ability to mark it as submitted. So it is a separate component, but you do need to have it in submit status either manually or as a part of the workflow process, change it to submitted. And then now I'm going to say, hey, good news, we received the award, and we're going to go ahead and generate the award. So at this
also see if I just want to track the status, maybe I have like hundreds of in progress proposals. Is there an easy way to just look at that?
Oh, sure. So there is some online inquiry, and then definitely I have an example of some pivot grids that I created in the past for tracking the status of proposals. So let's go into the inquiry. I have one of my favorites. So on the proposal side of things, there is an inquiry that allows you to narrow down by multiple fields here. So let's say I'm Kenneth Schumacher, and I just want to see the status of my particular proposals that are in, let's do submitted, since we just changed one to submitted. So now I can see, okay, these are the 5 proposals out there that we're waiting to hear back from the sponsor, also giving you the date that it was submitted. Okay, so you have the ability to, search by multiple values, either by dates or by statuses, and see your list. You may already know anything that is in a grid type format, you have the ability to not only search but download into Excel. Okay, and if this didn't give you as much information as you wanted to, we could easily create a tile, put it on your home page, and give you 29 access that information. I think I can bring up an example real quick. Where did was it this one? Proposals by year. Here is kind of an example of a pivot grid that from accessing the homepage tile, it quickly gives you a visual of your proposal statuses and then giving the ability to filter. And then you could also drill down more into the details. There's another example I built out. Okay, so here's a pivot grid that instead of showing the pie or like the graph chart, it's showing you it in dollars, and then when you drill down, you can see more information about the proposals. So lots of different ways. This is just one online inquiry, but we can create easy pivot grids to give you information to your proposals.
Thanks.
Okay. Okay, are we ready to generate the award and go over into post-award side?
For internal. So we have the signature sheet. So this will replace the signature sheet, what we know of the signature sheet, correct? Like this process we're trying to use, or is
There will be an internal conversation of where do what component goes.
Okay, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Because there are some elements that are on the signature sheet that are not here.
But that,
And we need those elements to be captured.
yeah.
Okay.
That there will be an internal kind of optimization.
Yeah, I think that's a part of your design. Hey, if we build out a workflow process, does those signatures replace manual signatures, or do you want to do continue to do kind of a combination of both? The one other way to enter proposals that I wanted to mention, or something to consider too, is where did I put that? There is a new functionality. Hold on, I can find it somewhere in here.
You guys talk about the page field configurator, Jessica?
No, not that one quite yet. I want to talk about the forms and approval builder. Something to consider for not only this, but those type of workflow routings that are paper-based for your organization today. You now have the ability to bring them into PeopleSoft in a configurable way. So this was an example that I built out for the units. I heard you talk about, did you say a face sheet or a cover sheet?
Signature sheet.
That's exactly
Yeah, so
what that would be.
So I took a bunch of their fields from their, I can't remember if they called it face sheet or cover sheet, but I made this page all by myself. I'm functional. There was no technical help on this. I configured the page to be able to bring in information, key information about a proposal. So not everything, but kind of the basic information. And what this could allow you to do is, through the Forms and Approval Builder, you can build in an approval process through this method, and once approved, actually generate a proposal and bring it into PeopleSoft. So it has a form where people enter information. You can include instructions. They can also make attachments. And I know this gets really small, but so after they've entered that information, if you clicked, if you've submitted it and go through the approval status and it's been approved, way down here you'll see it actually generated a proposal number for me and took this information from that form and brought it into PeopleSoft. So really cool functionality, not just related to grants, but an opportunity to bring information and create it within any one of your business processes.
And I'll just add, a couple of years ago, you could do all that, but it would all be customization, do it through development. And now it's all through front-end configuration, so you won't harm your policy around staying current with images.
So the forms that you build manually will be connected to the proposals entered, right? Okay.
It's just,
Yeah, it could be. So if you say, hey, I want to make it really easy for my researchers to, they have an idea that they want to do, I want to give them a tool to very quickly, enter some basic information and get a proposal started. This would be one way to think about it.
Yeah.
You might not want all your PIs, your research admins, whatever, touching PeopleSoft, but you give them a very basic form, and then you have like some kind of centralized office that can then validate it that it was entered correctly or supplement that.
Is that how
Yeah.
larger university institutions do it, or Fred Hutch or whatever, that generate, like, that you're dealing
Fred
with
Hutch
a
didn't
lot.
extend it out to, they kept it internally with a centralized
So
office.
a central office would enter all of this
Mhm.
stuff.
Yeah, but that was just one organization, right? Any organization can do it. But to be honest, that was, so the whole methodology at Fred Hutch was built way before Forms Approved Builder was even
Yeah,
delivered.
this is relatively new, exactly. Yep.
So, but again, to Jessica's point, this same functionality could be used anywhere. The use case we're talking about here is proposals, but that functionality can be used anywhere.
I'm assuming the forms are something that you could just publish on your own website.
Well, it's
It's
still in
within
PeopleSoft,
PeopleSoft.
but you can expose it, so you still have to have PeopleSoft login, but you could make it really easy where somebody can log in and only get to certain functions.
Mm-hmm.
They can do approvals, and then they can do so they don't get access to all the core functionality in different modules, just as a use case.
So these fields are that just, so you can have drop down or.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah. So the cool thing about this, when you build out that board, you can see, I made this, this is a lookup button, these are lookup buttons, so it's not only just making simple fields, you're really controlling the quality of the data. Okay, they can only select from the drop down, and which ones are required. I've indicated those. Those are indicated with a star.
And then once the form is complete, it's workflowable?
Yeah, that's Forms Approved, so that's the whole point, you get to leverage this centralized workflow.
Okay, well, let's continue on, if you guys are okay. Are we ready to go over into post-award?
Yeah, time check, we got about half an hour, so.
Okay, that's why I want to keep moving. Okay, so this is a page that does a lot of magic, and I'm going to jump back quickly to the PowerPoint and talk about what it does. Here we go. So I copied it and created a brand new proposal, right? And I had one project on my proposal. I decided to split it into multiple budget IDs because I like that method. I did enter a budget. I didn't do much here, but I did enter at least keywords. I submitted it. Now, when I generated the award, I selected, well, they defaulted as checked, but I could uncheck budgets or projects if they were no longer needed. When I click that Generate Award button, this is all the things that it creates for me. So based on the proposal information, it brings it over to Post Award, so you don't have to re-enter it. It creates what's called an award profile. It sets up a contract for me, which is how I bill and recognize revenue. Underneath that project, I can have one or multiple projects. In my example, I have one. For each project, I can have multiple activities. I have two. And then it brings over your budget information from your proposal. So you still have opportunities to make, you can continue to make changes to the budget, but it's bringing over what initially was awarded. So you'll see for those additional tabs, I've indicated what information comes over. There are some that do not come over, so those are the ones that are crossed off. But then there's also additional pages in post-award. Milestone is a really cool one that I want to show you. And then award modifications allows you to track changes to your award over time. So if you've gotten an additional amount for a grant, you can add that to your existing award. Okay, so notice my Generate Award button is grayed out, and now I can come and look at the various pieces of information that were brought over. So let's start off initially with the award profile. So it looks very similar to the proposal. It has the basic information. At this point, you would have some sort of award number. You could enter it there. As I go into my funding tab, so it brought over my project ID with my multiple budget periods. and in a minute here we'll drill down into the actual budget. So it brought over the budget that I entered. Notice nothing's been actually posted or set up in commitment control yet. It's just whatever came over from the proposal. Resources, if I've entered them. Certifications, I did enter that on pre-award. I could add additional ones here, what you're certifying to as an organization. You have the ability to enter in additional terms and conditions for this particular grant. So let's say we want to add some information about equipment. Milestones, really cool functionality here. So let's notice that there's 3 default milestone notifications that I've configured to automatically come over. That's configurable by you guys, as well as how many days prior would you like to receive a notification. So that's a default, and then for each milestone, it still can be changed on the grant. Oh, I meant to show you the data before I changed it. Shoot. Let me just see if I can change these dates back and open up a new window. So Oracle's really big on these milestones as a way to track those tasks that you need to do for your grant, whether it be submitting a report, if you want to have notifications for closeout. It's very configurable for your organization what you want to track. Even so that they've created a tile on the home page that allows you to drill into your detailed your milestone information. This is the fluid pivot grid that allows me to further narrow down the milestones that I want to look at. So you can narrow it down to particular milestone types, milestone codes, as well as see all the detailed information down below, and then you see it graphically as well. So you saw what was our count here. We're on our home page. It actually gave you the number of milestones due. We got 10, and I should be able to dynamically add this based on my date. What is my date on? Oh, I didn't put in my due dates. That's fine. Okay, cool. So let's backdate this just so we can see these dynamically change here. But one way out in the future as well. Okay, so I saved. Let's go back to my home page, refresh, and you'll see dynamically that, now I have two additional milestones that are due. Okay, so very cool functionality to not only visually see, but we mentioned the grants workflow. So you have the ability to send out email notifications as well based on the number of days prior that you want to get it prior to the due date. So you can also see these milestones due. There's an online inquiry. Question, yep.
In terms of the additional milestones on the post-award side, who is entering this information? Is it still the originator that set up the proposal, or is it another individual? Why I'm asking is because attachments aren't coming over, and from how our processes are, there are additional terms and conditions that are listed or noted on the award letter, which have the financial implications or additional due dates or information that we need to know. And if that attachment doesn't come over, but that information needs to be captured in order to do a reporting or billing, then how does that flow?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you're absolutely right in the sense that that milestone is entered on the post-award side. You don't have it, it's not a page on the pre-award side. So we do, I would say a lot of times, see there's different teams pre-award teams and then a post-award team that is completing the rest of the setup. So there does need to be some communication and handoff to make sure all of those of the award information is passed on to that team, and people do it different ways. Sometimes they do still use a centralized SharePoint or attachment functionality, or there's on the post-award side additional places to attach documents, so that final award letter could be attached on the post-award side, so both pre-award and post-award could see it.
There's a related question to that. If the document doesn't go through from pre-award to post-award, but does the post-award person have the ability to access or view the pre-award documents that are stored in the pre-award side?
If you give them security, yeah. So if I'm on I guess I didn't attach one in this case, but you can see from my award profile, there's links back to the proposal here as well. Okay, so I can jump from my award back to proposal.
And then the other question is, does the system store PDFs and different documents, and then is it searchable?
So yes, you can attach different types of documents, and is it searchable?
Like a PDF search or image search, where you want to know, maybe 20 years ago you didn't know that the experiment we were doing is related to climate change.
Yeah.
But
so I think that maybe is that Cameron, and maybe you might know too. I know there's Elasticsearch functionality that I think was renamed recently as well.
That we didn't implement in Sims currently, but it's available.
Okay.
So in the other PeopleSoft system, we're going to implement that, and it should allow you to do what we call global search. So when you search, it will search into.
And it goes into PDFs, it goes into images and things like that. Yeah, because that.
Do you store your PDFs
I
in
know.
the database, or do you store them? Yeah, because if you have them outside the database, then you could just go to them.
Yeah, but then we need some kind of a viewing access or a viewing ability from this system into that, or like some connection.
Well, they're all connected here, but even if you say you're making attachments here as a setup, you can say, I'm attaching it here, but the actual storage is not in your database. It's an external location.
So it could be like
And that doesn't mean that you can't have a link to it. Like I know at one of our customers, they stored voucher or invoices outside the system, but you could run a query, and then the query would have a link that would give you access right to that external attachment.
I would say
so there's different ways to go about it.
Just call it a design decision.
Can I go back to, I wasn't able to see that clearly, but when you were referring to, I guess, milestones or creating all these various timelines, were you referring to, like you can enter progress reports when those might be due, and which is more of a PI report to submit? Does that mean that can you design it so that when those milestones hit, that it can be sent to remind the PI versus
PI? Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So it's configured who you want to send that notification to. So it's like defaults based on the milestone type, but you can still change it for an individual individual milestone. So yeah, I think that's a really good use case and a good example of it. Billing, I mean, you do see billing here as a delivered value. Personally, I think there's better ways to track what billing needs to happen, but it's a delivered database, and there could be examples where you may want to have milestones for billing, but personally, I think you should be using different types of reports for managing, like as and current billing or milestone billing. But the reports are a really good example that you may want to notify that reports are coming due. Make sense?
Well, and then back to the budget, when you were building that budget, did it allow for multi-year budget information?
Yeah, multi-year budget. So that's exactly why I split out my budget IDs the way I did. There is, like I said, different ways to go about this, but I feel like one of the best ways to split out your funding by period of performance, which, you know, a funding year may be completely different than a fiscal year, right? What I did is for my project, I split out my budget into multiple activity IDs. And I know we haven't talked yet about the structure of projects, but you'll see here budget period 1 that has this begin and end date, I've brought over into my first activity. And then as I look into budget year 2, which I may not even want to post budget yet for budget year 2, I've associated it to a different activity. So you don't have to do it that way, but that's one of my preferred ways of doing it. And let me just show you sort of the structure of projects. So once we get on the post-award side, we're actually in using multiple modules, and within project costing, if you want the detailed transactions for your grant to get into the project costing module, this is what you need. You need to enter the project costing business unit, the project ID, and then at a minimum an activity ID, and then transactions come over with what's called an analysis type. So it's a way of kind of identifying what type of a transaction is it. Is it a budget? Is it an actual cost? And then each transaction not only will have its DL string, but additional information based on the transaction. So it could be a voucher ID. It could be an employee ID if you bring that information over. By splitting a project into multiple activities, I can manage my budget and my billing separately by period of performance without having to change the project ID. So that's pretty neat, you know, as they're going into the next year, not to have to change project IDs. You simply are using the next activity ID. So that's why in my example I split it out that way. And same, you'll see on the contract how that works nicely as well. So I brought over my budget for that budget period for that activity ID. I'm able to default my chart field string for commitment control. I could still make changes. As you see, I can add additional rows, or I can go ahead and finalize it and send it over to commitment control. That establishes a budget and commitment control and also sends it back to project costing. So let me just, I want to...
Use it at a very minimal level, just really to track.
Not control, just track.
No control. Yeah, we're out of control.
Right.
Right. No, it's just really just tracking encumbrances, and that's all we do.
Right, so the value here, of course, is you can restrict unallowable expenses on a grant.
I think we've had some discussions on that, but I don't think we've ever gotten to that point where we wanted to do restrictions. You can restrict it even if it's not as unspent, if it's covered.
Yeah, it would restrict you can't even create a PO before you can get an invoice coming in. So that's the value, but overdone, it becomes a burden.
Yeah, right.
So you gotta be careful about it. But
that's one of the reasons why we didn't go
right.
that way.
By policy, you can always just review it afterwards for unallowable expenses and move them off of there, or you restrict it from beginning.
So I think another important piece that maybe you're still getting to is my project's just been awarded, like we've been successful, and we're expecting a first payment of, let's say, $25,000 before we can actually get moving. Where am I recording that the $25,000 is due, and how can I see when we've actually received it? Because that keeps everyone kind of a holding pattern until that money shows up.
Are we talking about pre-award spending, or Cameron? Maybe you can rephrase the question.
First payment.
Mm-hmm.
So you got the award, and then what happened?
5,000 to buy before we would activate or set up a project. That is the payment that was based on execution of the agreement.
So when you got the award, and then, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the rest of it. Then what was the next steps that happened?
Yes, they're gonna get a $25,000 payment in, and they want to wait to get that payment before they set up the project. I would say the project's the thing that links it all together, though, so you have to set up the project even so, because you have to have somewhere to record that $25,000.
Yeah, we still set up the project, it's just, to me, it's kind of like.
You don't want to spend against it, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's almost like a milestone billing.
Right.
That's like, it's your first milestone, is your initial $25K.
So you can add a milestone.
Yeah.
There's really no, because typically you do an activity and you get paid.
Right.
In this case, there's no.
Yeah, this is not grants reimbursable. It is a fixed price product.
Okay.
And so you're triggering that right off the bat, which will then either send the bill in case you want to bill it, or even if you don't send the bill, but you have a bill recorded at $25,000 against. So it's still going against your project and award. And Jessica, please jump in here and correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, so I guess I'm trying to understand the scenario. Is it you got the award and you don't want to begin spending yet, or you want to spend but you won't be generating a bill or revenue until you receive the $25,000, something like that?
Yeah, I think it's more the concern of, so that the spending, the researcher can't spend
You
yet.
don't want to begin spending?
Yeah.
But in some cases,
Okay.
they can,
Yeah.
and we want them to.
Yeah, we have both scenarios. Sometimes,
Yeah.
Grant award approval means go ahead.
Exactly.
Sometimes it's don't go ahead until we get that first.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's multiple statuses within grants.
No, you have to have allowances for it.
So it sounds like there's a way to
Yeah.
deal with that.
Well, pre-award spending as well as no spending until you get the funding, so you can do it either way.
Yeah, as long as they have a choice.
Yeah, exactly. So there is a function specific for pre-award spending that does not actually generate the award, but allows you to start spending. And then also, depending on your statuses, both at your contract and your project level, allows you, do I want to allow this, do I want to activate this project and make it eligible to start billing? So there's a project status, there's also a project processing status, and then as you go into your contract, there's statuses here as well. So I mentioned when we generated the award, it automatically set up a contract for me. Contract is, as I mentioned before, the mechanism to say how am I going to bill and recognize revenue for this project. When I come over to the Lines tab, you'll see, based on my proposal setup, I automatically generated 2 different contract lines, and I've also set up my default billing plans. How do I want to bill this sponsor? So that's all that magic of the product ID and higher level settings. So here I've specifically said, okay, I'm not going to actually generate an as-incurred bill until it reaches this bill amount. Here's my form. This is how I want to print my invoice. Here's how often I'm going to be doing. In this case, on demand. There is no set schedule for this one. Bill by ID. How do I want to split my invoices? This is saying I'm going to split it for each unique activity ID. So if I start spending against the next year's budget period, I can still split my billing to make sure it only creates an invoice and has historical cumulative amounts for that individual activity. So just, a ton of flexibility on how you want to actually bill and recognize revenue for the grants. How do you want to control the spending? I heard you guys talking about commitment control. That is another, decision you guys can make about how you want to track it and control it. So this is just sort of tip of the iceberg here of different ways you can do it. But the cool thing is you know, when you generated the award, you got all this information. You can still make changes, or if I'm ready to go, I can go ahead and activate my contract and set it to ready.
I have a question about budget categories.
Okay.
So when we are, you know, pre-award stage and just thinking about how budget will look like, we have certain categories that we care about because of internal policy requirements. And then there are categories that the funder requires and requires us to submit and then report on. And there's categories that we normally follow internally. So how flexible is PeopleSoft so then we can pick our categories and then it rejigs the balance between, you know, salaries and equipment and CI fees.
So a big part of that is going to be on, well, in my mind, how you want your commitment control to roll up. So if we go, I don't know if it's best to show you an example right now or not. I want to go, I posted the award, or I posted the budget. Let me go real quick at a high funding level. So I initially came in with that budget that I got brought over from the proposal, and I had like 3 different budget items. I went ahead and posted that budget, but as we drill down into the budget, you can have your commitment control roll up through the use of account and trees. You can have commitment control roll up into multiple levels. This one, as an example, is kind of at a detailed account level, but let's take a look at a different customer example that shows how they wanted to roll up their spending. Bear with me 1 second as I go into the reporting.
Just to, can I select specific categories just to satisfy the sponsor's reporting requirement, or am I logged into categories that the system would give me a track?
It's all configurable. Yep. So here you see this is actually not even so there's 3 different roll-up levels here. At a very, the lowest level, a middle level, and a high budget period level. This is not even a detailed account, but I'm showing you what is my budget, how much have I pre-encumbered, what are my actual expenses, and what's my balance. So through reporting and commitment control, they're able to see, okay, my spending at this level or at a mid-level, a roll-up to the categories of labor, indirect capital, and then everything else, or at the very high level. So this is actually commitment control doing the roll-up for you, but you could also do it through reporting as well. But with commitment control, you have the ability to actually stop the spending at any one of these levels. You can say, hey, I can completely turn off a budget at that level to stop spending, or I could say, hey, I don't want to go over the budget with a certain percentage. So there's it's really flexible in terms of how what your sponsor wants to see and what you want to see.
Okay.
Did that answer the question?
I think so.
Okay. Yeah, and keep in mind, these were the default budget items that came over. So, like on the post-award side, if you really wanted to build out your budget just solely based on what the sponsor wanted to see, you could do that. But I guess it also depends on how what they want to see for invoicing too, right? So the invoicing for as incurred typically is based on a roll-up of accounts as well. So that's the way the delivered grants invoice works, kind of similar to commitment control in the sense of you put your accounts into a grouping, whether it's supplies or labor, so then you can print and roll up your invoicing at a group of account level instead of, for each individual account. Similar concept.
Can I just ask a question in regards to when you define the budget line items, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
then you say post.
Yep.
So that post will go to the GL, the financial GL, right? That gives the faculty member access to spend or draw down from, right? When
I do that post budget here, it goes to GL in the sense that it establishes it in commitment control and allows me to start spending, and it sends it over to project costing for reporting purposes. It's not actually creating a financial transaction in the general ledger.
So what you're saying is that when you send the when you send the budget over, it's going into the it's going into the budget in the commitment control ledger.
Yep, exactly. Yep, exactly.
Not the budget ledger.
How does it get to the budget ledger?
It doesn't.
Okay.
That's not like it doesn't. It's going into the commitment control ledger.
How
It's a
do
control
you
budget.
control your budget ledger currently? How do you feed in your budget ledger? Do you have an external system?
It's a journal through PINs, through PeopleSoft that posts to the budget
To a budget
ledger.
ledger? Okay. And then does that then tie to commitment control in any way?
No.
Okay, so it's just a standalone budget
Yeah.
that compare your actuals.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. This feed commitment control. Can this feed a budget ledger? I think is the question.
Yeah.
Non-commitment control budget ledger.
I don't know if it can do it automated, but I'm sure you could, do an allocation to populate it. But I don't know if it can do both.
Control, so commitment control. So,
Yeah. It's
which
just
is the normal function? We'd have to look in and see if you could just push it to a budget ledger that's not a commitment control ledger.
So the issue here is that we don't use the commitment control ledger to control spending, right? We don't stop transactions.
No.
If it's approaching too high. So we only use commitment control just for tracking.
But you have a budget in your commitment control ledger, and you have a different budget in the budget ledger?
No, we don't really use the commitment control ledger for budget. We don't.
But you're just saying track versus control, and I get that, and feed that.
No.
Even though it's not control.
Well, we're using it for tracking income.
Right.
Right.
Mhm.
The budget and the actual side of things, we don't really look at on the commitment control ledger.
Yeah.
We only look at it in the GL.
Is your budget ledger at the project level, or do you do it more at a higher level?
Yeah. Okay.
So I think we need to understand how this would work, because it is philosophically different than what we're doing today.
Yeah. And that's fine. I mean, it's something that I think, maybe we need to.
But does
I was just gonna say, we can look into it for sure to see if that would work. Normally it's going over commitment control ledger.
Yeah.
Even for versus tracking, not control, even
Yeah,
track.
no, that's fine.
Yeah, well, we can look into that. But is your budget ledgers down to the project grant level today, or is it posted at a higher level?
No, it's at the project level.
Okay. All right, we can look into that. Okay, so is that okay if I kind of pick up from, maybe I should.
Time check. 358, Jessica, hold on, so 358, can people go long? Do we need to stop right at 4?
We do have to go.
Okay.
Yeah, we got.
No, it doesn't.
It goes till 4:30?
4:30, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, for the meeting.
I think the meeting was booked at 4:30, but I'm just.
Oh, was it? Okay.
So I think it sounds
Great.
like most of us are good for 30.
Got it.
All right, well, I want to just talk a little bit more on the setup side, and then I want to talk about just showing an example of billing and AR. One of the neat things I wanted to mention also on the award profile is the supplemental data feature. You'll notice for me, when I log in here, it's blank. That's because this is meant to be used how you guys want to fill it out in terms of what additional fields do you need for reporting purposes for your grant. So let me just show you an example of one of our, I think this is Fred Hutch example, exactly how they filled out their supplemental data. So instead of having to create a customization to add a field to track something that you need to report to your sponsor, if it's not an existing field, now you can configure these fields, and you have ability to define what is the format that you want. Does it just free-form text? Is it a date time? Is it a yes/no checkbox, or specific drop-down values that you define? So it's very easy to configure these, doesn't involve much technical support, and actually you can have some logic built into it that says, only display it when, for example, the award type begins or is CON. So there's also some additional logic you can build into when it needs to be populated or displayed. So after configuring these fields at Fred Hutch, so this is how they've decided to use it. They had some special FOFATA reporting that they needed to track, and they used a drop-down value for that. They had some text fields, dates. So really a great way to control your data entry if there's additional fields you need to track for reporting purposes that just simply are not available. Super cool. I also wanted to mention there's new functionality for page and field configurator that allows you to either default values for a page or change the title of a field without having to make customization, or hiding a field, disabling entry. So another way to control the quality of the data being entered without making it a customization, which is great. Okay, last thing on the kind of the setup, I wanted to talk about the indirect cost processing. We saw it at the proposal stage, the F&A rate. That was brought over to the proposal, but you could still make changes if you needed to. So I'm drilling down into the activity underneath my project. When I go into the F&A rates tab, you'll see the similar structure where there's a base and an actual awarded rate. So how this works is, let me go to the page with a tree. Let's see, contract. Where is my F&A? There it is. So if my base is MTDC, as you incur costs on the grant and you get an expense transaction underneath my base, which is defined as a node on a tree, it will it does a lot of checks before it actually creates the rows. Very robust. It checks to make sure you're passing combination edits, that you're passing budget checking, that you have your project is active, that you're passing commitment control, all those things. But if you pass all those checks, it will create a new indirect cost row at the rate that you've specified here. Now, you might say, well, shoot, what happens if I I thought it was 75, but it was actually a different rate. There's new functionality that allows you to go back and actually retroactively recalculate it if you've made a mistake on the rate or the base. Very nice. When you create these transactions within project costing, it automatically generates the entry into the GL as well. So as I start looking at spending against my grant, I set up an example. Here we go. So it takes a while to run all these jobs. So I just wanted to show you an example of billing. And this is as incurred. What type of grants do you, what's the majority of how your grants bill and recognize revenue?
As incurred, fixed, milestone.
It's on an installment basis, like with the majority of our federal tri-agency grants, the funding, the budget is loaded for the full fiscal year. However, the revenue comes in on a bi-monthly basis, so we get 6 installments throughout the fiscal period.
Not really as incurred.
Yeah. And then there's others that come in and they're on a cost reimbursement basis.
Oh, you do have some.
Yeah.
Yeah, NA, that's right. And majority would just 50-50 split. I mean, is there?
There's more grants than the cost reimbursement basis, definitely.
Okay. All right, so this is an as incurred example. The fixed amount, I can bring up a contract if you want to look at the events, but notice here I've posted budget and I can report right out of project costing on those rows that I posted, BUD budget. I just created a general ledger journal entry to bring in the cost. What happens if it's as incurred, based on your contract, it will know I need to create a billable transaction at 100% of the cost. At least that's typically how it is for grants. Technically, you could set that rate to be whatever you want it to be, but normally it's a 1-for-1. And it will evaluate, am I under the contract limit? So I set up a limit for each activity, so each budget period can have its own limit. Here, we just started spending. I'm under the limit, so I'm going to create a billable transaction. Here is that delivered grants indirect overhead process. I ran it for my project, and now you'll see for each of the rows eligible for F&A, so I had my 10,000, 1,000, they were accounts that were in my base, and so based on my 75% rate, it went ahead and created that additional indirect overhead. Now I can run my billing, and contracts looks into project costing to see, okay, how many billable rows do I have out there that I haven't billed? You have the option to create what's called a temporary worksheet. That means, hey, I can take a look at this and defer things or completely start over before that invoice gets finalized. So here's my contract that I staged it on, my total amount. When I click into that temporary worksheet link, I can see the 4 costs that I brought in for billing. If I wanted to, I could say, nope, you know what, I'm not sure about a couple of these items. If they're valid, I have to hold off on billing them. And so I could change these to DEF to defer them to a later point. I could also completely start over and check it and say delete. That doesn't actually delete the physical transactions. It just sends them back and allows you to rebill them at another point. So nice options here, but not required.
Jessica, hold on.
Can I ask a question for clarification? Can you explain to me what do you mean when you say contract?
Yes, let's go back to the PowerPoint. So when I generated that award, based on the product that I specified on my proposal, which is basically what's the defaults that I want when I generate the award, it brought over all the information from the proposal, and it created what is called a contract within PeopleSoft. A contract tells the grant how you bill and recognize revenue. So the contracts module.
Contract.
Yep.
Okay, that's,
Yeah. It's considered grants and contracts, right?
Okay. Because when you were saying pulling contract, I was like, well, what is it pulling and where? But, thank you so much.
Remember, when you buy grants on top of projects and contracts, two existing modules. You guys could buy project contracts without grants, because you don't get extra grants functionality. So.
But what you call contract is not even what we call contract.
Well, when we say we, so PeopleSoft modules, when you buy contracts, it sits on top of these modules called projects and contracts. Those are two separate.
Yeah, so that's.
Well, what does the PeopleSoft contract do?
So the whole purpose right here is a contract is going to control how you bill and recognize revenue. If it's Milestone, it will maintain the milestone amounts that you want to bill for the events, and it sends that information to billing to create an actual invoice that you can send to your sponsor. You can email it or print it, whatnot. Then ultimately, billing sends information to receivables so you can manage your AR. How much am I still expecting to receive from my sponsor? So because grants sits upon and uses these modules, you get all the functionality within the contracts module. So any different types of ways you want to bill and recognize revenue, the grant, you have the ability to set up your contract different ways. You can even have multiple different lines on a contract where you maybe you want to bill a portion of it fixed amount, but the rest of it as incurred. You have that flexibility within contracts.
If I
Super
can
cool.
also
So
try and answer here, regardless of the type of contract or grant that you have, grant or contract, when you put in the system, it will create one or multiple projects, and it will create a contract.
Yeah, and the contract is the terms and.
It's just the way, it's the mechanism to capture all of it, create the rules for how you're going to do the billing, whether it's pre-award spending, whether it's funding coming up front, if it's as incurred, if it's fixed price milestone. Contracts, I think, is going to control all of that and kind of be traffic cop from capturing all those costs and sending them over to the bank. So it's just terminology. So even though you guys don't consider that a contract, you're going to get a contract whenever you create a grant.
So about the billing, I just wanted to clarify, or maybe understand what I'm looking at. Did you, Jessica, did you transfer that, the GL numbers over to that billing?
Yes,
Is that what we're seeing those numbers?
It does it automatically for you, and so it's basically both contracts and grants, right, will create entries into a staging table, and then they're brought into the GL. So I can actually, I know this might be hard to look at because you're not familiar with their chart fields, but I can bring up the transactions into, oh gosh, I haven't even gotten to the PI portal yet, which is awesome, but let me just quickly show you the ledger inquiry if that's something you're used to looking at.
Sure. Just really quickly, let me try and answer. I think what you're asking is, can you control by account, which things get billed out back to the sponsor, which ones don't, right?
Even for a designated period.
Yeah, and that's all configured through your setup, so that when we looked at that list of transactions, you could see the BUD rows, the bill rows, the GLE rows, SFA rows. So it knows which ones to create, like on a reimbursable model, knows which ones to create bill rows, which ones don't. And then those bill rows then are consolidated and sent over to bill and to actual bill off the sponsor. So yes, the answer is.
Oh, okay. Okay, sorry, I thought you were talking about the GL.
And that's actually the base, right? So it's part of your base, MTDC base, about how you assign the F&A. You guys consider some accounts in, some accounts not for your F&A base?
Yeah, there's a possibility,
It's a similar concept, so just you track it through the configuration, which ones are going to be captured, and which ones are going to be billed, etc.
Okay, cool.
Doesn't look like I answered your question.
I'm just trying to understand the
reconciliation process between the GL and the information that is being brought in and where
See, you were asking about GL.
Well,
Yes,
there
so-
was a couple different questions, I think.
I think maybe the larger picture is, the way that we're currently using, and we're currently talking to the GL versus sort of what's being proposed here, right? And I think, I think it might be helpful to pull out from the detail a little bit and just have that broader discussion.
Yeah, because I get a lot of questions, we get a lot of questions at demos, can we? So the answer is usually yes. It just is a design decision as part of the implementation. So I think to answer these questions, yes, absolutely, you can do all these things. It's just a matter of how you configure it and design the actual solution.
Right.
So lots really easy to configure without customization. I think that's the important.
Yeah, and I think we should make sure we keep track of all these questions. Because as we go forward, we understand and get to the answers. But I think it's helpful to pull back from the detail.
Yeah, I think for today, because we only got 15 minutes of meeting, I'd really like you to be able to get highlights that we've not yet covered that I think are important to the audience.
Sounds good.
Yeah, we're just about ready to get into the reports. So I just was going to show you a couple billing screens, AR, and then we'll go over to the reports. Does that sound good?
And we'll get you this deck. I mean, it's 120 slides, so you can go through one by one and note your questions, and we'll get answers for you.
The one thing I think it would be really interesting to see if time permits is if I'm the PI, I'm out in faculty, and I'm actually approving the expenses that will be charged against my budget, I'd like to know there's an easy way for me to see online what I've actually spent already.
Yeah, okay, let's go there.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so there is a relatively new grants portal that you can access just in a couple of clicks here. It's designed to show you information as a researcher at the high level, but be able to drill into the details. So notice I'm coming in as, once again, Kenneth Schumacher, and I have the ability to look at all the grants that I'm responsible for. Or I can change the search criteria. So this is the search criteria I've saved. I can narrow it down to look at particular sponsor information. Right now, I'm just narrowing it down for those grants that I have access to underneath my business unit. Okay? But so not only do you see the list of awards, so here I have access to 37 of them, but all the financial information is also being rolled up down here. So at the individual award level, so the example we were just looking at was this contract. It was had funding and budget amount for this amount. This is the actual amount that I've spent it against already. If I had any pre-encumbrances, like requisitions out there or encumbrances, purchase orders, and then the calculation of what is my remaining balance. Also, the information that you can bring is how much have I invoiced. I think I have one. Oh, I'm sorry. This is the one that I demo because I invoiced how much has I received, and then this is my remaining unpaid amount. Okay, very cool. So at a high level, giving you those big bucket information, and then at an individual award level, if I wanted to, I could drill down from there to get further information. Okay, so for this particular award, I see some demographic information about it. I can see, if I have multiple projects underneath my activity, so demographic information. I think the budget status tab is really awesome. So down to the award level, now I can break it down and see it at a further broken down level of by budget item, what is my budget, how much I've expended, and then, encumbrances, what's my remaining balance. Okay, does that help answer one way about going about providing information as a researcher of where my grants are at?
I would just say this is after the fact, right? So, you know, the control
Yep.
up front, you can do it systematically through commit control, but you can also then, those PIs or designees could be part of the approval process on things like requisitions or POs, so before it goes out the door. So this is kind of after fact sort of review.
I think I have a few other fields on the slides on the reporting side of things. I also love the new functionality of work centers designed to quickly bring information to you of key actions that need to be attended to. So there's shell work centers delivered for each module. This is the grants, but you can tailor them to your roles, your organization. I absolutely love these, you know, my work. Let's go jump into the work center here, see it an example of the grants work center. So as for those that are kind of administrating on, you know, either the setup side or monitoring the billing or, you know, month-end, year-end close processing, tell me what it is that I need to do. Are there things out there that haven't been billed? So, for example, here's an exception, billing plans requiring user action. So not only in the Work Center can you get information that you need to take action on, you can actually take actions here right within the Work Center without leaving the Work Center. So, for example, this one, I see I have a billing plan on hold. Here was the hold date. From here, I can go ahead, if it's ready to, I can remove the hold. And when I refresh my data, I can dynamically see what are my new totals. Another really cool new feature added for the Grants Work Center, I love this, the ability to take mass actions here on proposals. So let's say maybe you were loading proposals in. You have the ability to automatically in batch submit or generate awards. Instead of doing them one by one, if you had the need to do those for a big group, you could do those right from here. These links take you, you know, just almost like shortcuts to the favorite navigations. You have the ability also to add in your list of favorite queries or pivot grids. I wanted to also show, before we leave the topic of Work Center, so I mentioned you can tailor these for your organization. They deliver shell ones, but you can make your own.
I think people would like some Q&A.
Okay, all right, Jessica, so I think we're, I think they kind of want to shift to a little bit of Q&A, so
Okay.
I think that got through most of what she was going to show.
I did, yeah.
So,
yep.
And I think when you see the deck, you'll see a lot more detail, of course, that we kind of passed through.
Yeah.
But it might trigger additional questions, that sort of thing. So, what questions do you guys have now?
I have a question in regards to the billing and listing financial reporting part of it. Can we customize our own template, because certain sponsors have their own required format?
Oh, of course, yes.
So is
yeah,
that,
absolutely.
you can do that within the system?
Yeah, I don't even use customize. I mean, that's,
Or, yeah.
Yeah, the way the billing data comes over, gets grouped, segregated, split out, you know, all that stuff to get it out there, and then actually what invoice form it goes on to, absolutely. Yeah.
And what kind of resources do most organizations engage to do that work? Like, is that like a business analyst job? Is that like a business end user who can do that work? What's your experience with that?
Well, so the invoice form is a BI publisher report, so that sits outside of the database, but leveraged within the database, right?
Mm-hmm.
So technically that's a customization that's outside the database.
Mm-hmm.
So normally we see BI publisher developer do that. BI publisher is pretty straightforward, so a functional user can actually learn it and build that template in a Word doc. Usually it's the whole process is sort of designed by a functional technical person, whether that person rolls up in an IT function or a finance function or a grants management function. Somebody who kind of understands the interplay between the function and the technical.
Other questions? What features are grants support in terms of sponsor perspective? What you're seeing so far is from a researcher perspective or internal. Does grants provide an option to send a report to a sponsor like that? From a sponsor perspective, do you have anything?
Just to make sure I'm clear, still as a grantee, right? You're not talking about the grantor. So you're asking like what you could send directly from PeopleSoft to a sponsor? Is that what you're asking?
So the grants module, whatever we have seen today, it talks about how we manage grants from an SFU perspective, right? So what it's going to offer from a sponsor, the person who's granting, like
other interfaces,
Yeah,
I think it depends a bit on what the sponsors.
Yeah, sponsors have usually really unique requirements. And so in as much as there's not one standard, I would say like something like an NIH, you probably have a lot of funds from NIH, so they have their standard, in terms of, and you can do even electronic submission to NIH. Every other sponsor, who knows?
Usually what happens is, whenever a sponsor, in terms of grants or in terms of sponsoring a student, right? So it's us we normally send the information to, right? They don't have a self-service option. They don't have anything so that they can check information real time in the system. So do grants provide any such type of functionality?
But is
there
a demand for it? I've never heard a demand for that function from any sponsor. Did you hear a demand for it?
Not here, probably outside.
Okay.
We have done something like a sponsor self-service type of module.
So there's functionality for like supplier self-service, but I don't know if I've ever heard that from a grantor perspective.
No, but the big ones have their portals, and we communicate to them through the portals, so they're all set there.
Right.
Because all the information they need, we put on the portal.
And unfortunately, those are all one-off feeds, right?
Yeah.
So you got to build those individually to each of those. So.
For the financial though, for the annual financial, we have to report through their system, and right now, we basically have to download a data file into their format, and then upload it into their system for the financial.
Yeah, and you can use BI Publisher for that kind of thing, because BI Publisher can feed data into a set format.
But it's certain fields and certain information that needs to be captured in the grants module, because it has to align.
Right. So we talked about using things like supplemental data or field page configurator to capture more than what's there.
Mm-hmm.
That already has a lot of stuff. If there's additional fields that you need to capture and values, whatever, you can capture that through, again, without customization, through supplemental data field page configurator. And you can pull that back out in terms of a feedback using BI Publisher into a format that is specifically what the grantor or the sponsor needs. And then you can do electronic feeds, of course, as well. So you pull that out electronically and submit it without going into, and that would be BI Publisher. BI Publisher is great to produce a report and send it, or even upload it. But if you're in electronic feeds, you can build an interface with electronic feeds.
I think this maybe relates more to project costing, so it might be a little bit, but it's related back to the, billings and stuff. We understand that with salaries that are through the Mindful Hat system, the activity or what's posted, the charges, can it flow to a activity line in project costing, which means it also, I guess, ties it back to the contract and therefore billings, right?
Yeah.
Can you do that? Because there was a
I don't think you can,
that we
you
could,
need to use time and labor.
Well, are you talking about a PeopleSoft? So financials is not PeopleSoft HCM, HR, right? So that's where you would capture all that. If you're not using PeopleSoft HR, I don't know if you are.
We are.
Oh, okay. So and you're capturing.
Someone's biweekly pay.
Right. Right. So are you already interfacing that over to financials?
Yes, we do. Yeah.
Okay.
But I don't think we have time and labor yet.
Yeah, we don't have.
Time and labor is our own
Yeah.
also.
Okay, so,
Yeah, in terms of like the timesheets and all
Yeah.
that, that's
Yeah.
not through time and labor, it's through a bolt-on, in the HR or payroll system.
and when it comes across, does it come across with a project code or anything with, or how does it come
Well, it
across?
can be tied to the, because of the project number, but I don't think to the
It comes-
activity line,
well,
that PO for activity.
Well, it comes across, through the, HR accounting line.
Yeah, that's right, so it can come across, it can be captured, and then flow right into project costing, and then billed. That's exactly what Fred Hutch does.
Because I thought in the
Even though we're not using time and labor.
Is it because the half side, I thought you
Um,
said they need that activity line. Like they can't.
So there's a delivered project interface table that you can feed into to load the detailed payroll data into project costing. So it's a really large table, and
so,
if you just scroll down into a detailed transaction, you see it has the ability to bring in employee, if you want to, the employee ID, time reporting code, pay end date.
but without the individuals, you can still bring it over at project level and still bill it.
At the summary
So-
level, yes, and then get your reporting from a different table.
So it's detail,
Yeah,
an actual hours
It's just
worked or
bringing
whatever.
hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, actually,
Which might be an easier way to.
it'll
do
be, because it's going into the GL, just like any other GL entry, it's
Right.
going over to the project. That's what we're saying.
Again, you can design it however you want. If you're currently coming straight into GL, it can be collected back from GL back to project costing. If Fred Hutchett went into project costing first, because they actually built a bolt-on labor cost distribution module that captured all those details, and then it's summarized into project costing, and then sent to GL. So it was kind of a different path. If you want to go through
Or there
GL,
could be
you
a
can do it
dual
that way.
feed as well, one feed to the GL
Yeah, or
and one
dual
feed,
feed.
separate feed to the PC.
So the bottom line is you have an amount coming across with a project code. Once you get that, you can go straight in and get in terms of reimbursable billing.
The train can go anywhere it wants, we just have to build the track. The right.
Yeah, but you don't have to even modify from what you're doing currently, because you're already capturing GL. So you just trigger that collection back from GL back into project costing, and it will get billed.
Yeah,
It just
well,
considers-
modifying the route to get that information into the GL, I think would be a massive take.
Yeah, you don't need to,
Going this way is.
unless you want more detail. Project costing has a lot more detail you can capture. You're kind of getting it down to the accounting level in GL, and that's fine to go from there to project costing. But you consider like that just like an AP expense, or any other expense that's just being collected in project costing.
Yeah, that might be something for later.
Sounds like,
Right?
yeah.
That might, when we start talking, when we think about the scope of the project and the design of the project, certainly it's worth considering. But we'd have to balance that against the value, right? Yeah. The cost and the benefit.
Okay. Any other questions?
I think the question that I would have is like, what happens now? And so because I think we've opened up a good can of worms, in that people have questions. We weren't going to go through the whole demo, but you proposed sending the deck and then having people ask their questions. Does that work for everybody?
I mean, we're very happy to advise you on the process. I mean, I've gone through this many times. If you guys are evaluating PeopleSoft grants versus a non-Oracle grants product, we can talk you through pros and cons of, what it looks like for an integrated solution. Obviously, we're going to push you really hard to consider the integrated solution, and all the great features you're going to get from that. But it sounds like to me that's your guys' next steps, sort of figuring out if you want that all within PeopleSoft. And if so, how do you scope out a project that incrementally builds a foundation and then iterates off there?
I think that's fair, but I'm also just wondering, based on the conversation, whether people need to understand it a little bit better before they can actually say.
Oh, sure.
Whether they prefer choice.
We, oftentimes we'll do longer longer
Yeah,
and then
Well,
maybe
this is still like early days in the whole project life cycle. This
Yeah.
is more like educational
Yeah,
information,
sure.
knowing that we're
Yeah.
already in PeopleSoft shop and
Yeah.
need to kind of grant solution.
Yeah, just giving you a little taste here.
Mhm.
So,
But would it be helpful for, individuals who are more interested in specific components to drill down further?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with
Yeah.
that at all. Just run it through
Yeah.
me and then
Yeah.
I'll coordinate with these folks.
Okay.
Quick burning question. Can it use, or track in-kind contributions? Like, it might not be stuff that's on the GL, but maybe for the sponsor's purposes, to try to track a full cost of a project. Have any other universities done something to that?
Jessica, do you know
Is
the
it a
answer to that?
is it a non-financial transaction?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, so
Do you-
what I've been seeing is people entering those into project costing. So I'm looking at, I was looking at a detailed transaction here. So these are all, so the GLE, SFAs, those are financial transactions that are in the GL. Your budget is also in KK. You have the ability to add additional transactions into Project Resource that are just for reporting purposes, that don't trigger any accounting, that don't trigger any billing. They're merely available for reporting purpose. So that is, kind of what I've been seeing lately for those non-financial transactions.
There's a dollar value attached to it.
Yeah.
It can have a dollar value, that's fine, yes.
No, you
No.
don't.
You just
So,
capture
so it's not just non-financial. In-kind is also when, SFU is in a collaboration with UBC, and UBC has most of the funds, but SFU is contributing with some salary, some time of employees that we don't give them as cash. We just provide them in kind of in-kind time.
Is that cost sharing? Is that the same as cost sharing?
It sounded like a cost.
When the vendor, is selling a piece of equipment to you, and they, it's $100,000, but they will give it to you for, because of this research project, they give it to you for $50,000. And so that $50,000 that you save, you want to track that because you want to show that this project,
The value.
that's the value of the piece of equipment.
And it could be multiple transactions referring to one particular activity. So we're just kind of like, how do you enter that, or use that as a way to track of multiple transactions?
So, like Jessica said, project costing is really, really good at just, you can add transactions in here, and you have things like analysis type, you have amounts. So it could be something that you're just throwing in there from a reporting perspective. It could either be part of the budget side, right? Or it could be part of the, expense side, or it could be part of the billing side. But you can throw extra things in here. You could throw an additional type of transaction that doesn't really go anywhere.
Yeah.
So you can put that in. It doesn't automatically going to say anything you put in here is going to go build. No, it doesn't, right? There's budget rows in here as well. So again, this is your one-stop shop to have all these different types of data. Some of it will generate.
Because this is more, I guess, leading to the building.
Not necessarily, no, because again, this is to capture this. You see budget rows there too. That's not going to go out with billing. So this is just your one-stop shop to look at all the different types of data that are associated with this project, which rolls up into the grant.
So we put that category, or what would that be for
You have an
in-kind?
an in-kind analysis type that just.
And then it would,
Probably a completely different analysis type, yep.
Category too.
Yeah, because this, you see the BLD, which were BILs, after you bill it in terms of BLDs, you have budgets. If you scroll down, you're going to see GLEs, SFAs. All these analysis types are controlled, so it knows that when it sees GLE, I'm going to create a bill row for that. When I see an SFA, I'm going to create a bill row for that. When I see an ACT, which represents an AP voucher, I'm going to bill for that. But let's say I see an in-kind transaction, I don't do anything with that. I just let it sit. But you, as part of your analysis, you can put that together and create a separate column. You could group it. Totally up to you. Project costing is very flexible with that.
So then you could take that transaction information and put it into a formatted report
report.
If you think about a report
Yep.
that has budget, actuals, encumbrances, if you want to have a fourth column set in-kind donations, you could do that, or you could include in-kind donations in your actuals, up to you.
Yeah, and it would just be as if, so in-kind salary, in-kind, equipment or whatever, right?
Very, very easy to do. So, do you guys want to coordinate like follow-on topics, so a little bit more deep dive? There is a lot here, so starting with pre-award to post-award, right? I mean, we went through really quickly. We could spend a good couple days on pre-award, or whatever. So post-award obviously is a lot more functionality involving all different modules. So we took a tour of modules like that, right?
Yeah.
So, in fact, we didn't even explain the contract, right? So we had to come back and explain. So that's how fast it went. So we'll look to you guys to tell us what our next steps.
Yeah, we'll have to leave it with Dan and I as well.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, I think it's important that, to your point, is we went on a tour and it started to generate a lot of good discussion.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that we, work through those things because people want to know how it would work, right?
Can't really make a decision without understanding that.
Yeah.
And we're also at the same time looking at remodeling the business process around all of it.
Yeah,
Right.
So understanding more about the technology can help stimulate ideas and thoughts about ways that remodeling could
Totally.
Can I have a technical question? So in terms of integration, if it's within PeopleSoft, are there integration fields already between HR and finance in this case for this module? Versus if we end up living with a third-party product, I would think we'll have to build integration.
Well, so, hold on. So third party, you were asking HR though, right? Did you mention HR to financials?
Yeah.
So that's delivered,
So
right?
like that
So you
whole
have HR and financials already.
What does it mean from integration perspective? Like,
So if you don't use grants,
yeah,
then you have to consider where do you want to integrate?
yeah, okay.
In other words, do you want to use billing? Do I use PeopleSoft billing? Do you, can you bill with an outside system? At the end of the day, it's accounting entries. So you could generate all the stuff outside the system and just generate accounting entries. Then you're not really leveraging all of the features, the ability to cost collect, the ability to transfer to billing, to letter of credit, and all that stuff. I mean, it's that's the whole integrated solution versus.
Oh, I know. So I just want to bring this up. So in terms of considering which way to go, that
I would
for long term, that's one of the.
Yeah. So again, this is why we talk about integrated solutions. So looking at a non-PeopleSoft solution for this, there will be pros and cons. One of the cons you'll have is, of course, is all the interface you'll have to build and maintain. And so then the question is, where do we build those interfaces? And then you have a reporting problem because now your reports have to then merge two different systems and data sets. You also have a master problem. Who's the master of your chart fields and all these values? So you have a lot of problems to solve if you don't go PeopleSoft. Let me put it that way. Is that the right answer from Oracle perspective?
From the savings perspective, that's why I want to use this too. Assuming that it will meet all the requirements, then definitely I would encourage us to stay with PeopleSoft because of all these issues that he just.
So we do this all the time, and not just the grants, with all the systems, right? You guys have done this before too. Everybody else will come in and tell you how easy it is to use those systems, and yes, it integrates with PeopleSoft. They never tell you how and how much it's going to cost you, and not only now, but in the future. So I just caution you about that. And so oftentimes when you look at these best-of-breed solutions, it's all about feature functionality. And it's like, oh, look at this feature and functionality. Yeah, what about, are we getting off of PeopleSoft financials? Because if we're not, we have significant work here to build integrations. Again, this is me, not as a consultant, this is me managing these systems internally for many years at Fred Hutch and other places. So this is why I really try to caution you guys to understand the details.
Yeah, you need to make a decision knowing all of those factors.
Yeah. So we can for sure work through those as you guys have more questions.
Great.
We'll put you guys to.
Okay, I'm going to stop the recording.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I will stop the recording.